Hey, beautiful, please consider subscribing to our channel if you've been enjoying these stories. Your support helps a lot. Aid us in reaching our goal of 1,000 subscribers.
The hammer struck the last nail into the fresh cedar plank, and I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Sweat clung to my neck. The late afternoon sun baked my skin, and the scent of cut wood and earth rose from the dirt like an offering. The fence stood strong, a perfect line of timber separating my yard from the chaos next door. I admired it for half a second before I heard the shriek, "You can't do that." "This is my property." I turned slowly. There she was, marching across her lawn in flip-flops and fury, her sunglasses perched high on her nose like a royal crown. Her dog, a puffball with a bark bigger than its brain, yapped in time with every angry stomp she took. "You can't build a fence there. I already told you. That land belongs to the HOA Commons. My name is Luke Patterson. I've served this county for 24 years, retired 2 years ago as sheriff. But I still consult when they need me, which means when people call for help. I'm usually the one answering. It also means I know exactly where my property lines are, and where hers and I stepped off the last rung of the ladder. Picked up the deed I kept in a plastic sleeve by the toolbox, held it out without a word. Her lips curled, but she snatched it anyway. Her eyes scanned the legalese. She read it once, then again, then squinted like she could will it to say something. "Else this can't be right." "It is, but you bought this from old Mr. Dalton. He didn't even live on that land, still owned it. And now I do?" She shoved the paper back into my chest. "That lot is part of the HOA trails. You can't just buy up nature." I kept my voice calm. I'd been dealing with people like her for years, the kind who talk like they were appointed by God and elected by no one. "This was never part of your HOA. This is private land. No trails, no commons. Just mine." She scoffed, tossed her hair back like it offended her. "Well, we'll see what the board says." That was the first time I met Karen. Real name Tricia, but no one called her that, not even her husband. Not that I ever saw him. Only heard about him in the form of passive-aggressive threats. "My husband will deal with this," or "You wouldn't act like this if he were here." But he never was what she lacked. In fact, she made up for in volume. The next morning, I found a bright orange envelope duct-taped to my garage. A fine, $200. For unauthorized alteration of community landscape. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was predictably few days later. I saw her again. This time snapping photos of my backyard while pretending to walk her dog. She crouched behind her hedges like she was a spy. I waved. She dropped the phone next week. Another notice. This one warning me about unauthorized tree removal. I'd cleared a dead pine. She called it environmental destruction every day. A new note. A new excuse. One afternoon, I caught her stepping through the hedges, trespassing on my property. Her little dog squatting on my flower bed. Afternoon, she jumped like I'd fired a gun. "This isn't your land. It's a public walkway. The HOA has a right to access." Gestured to the fence posts lined neatly along the property markers. "That walkway you're using is a deer trail. The fence will go right through it. You wouldn't dare." I just smiled. A week passed. I worked quietly. I had my permits, my surveyor's lines, everything legal. The fence rose one panel at a time. A beautiful cedar barrier that sent a clear message: stay out. But Karen didn't get messages. She got louder one evening. I came home and found one of my fence panels lying flat, all marks on the posts. Someone had tried to cut them. I checked my security cam. There she was, at 2 a.m. in pajamas and gloves, holding a tiny hand sigh. Took the footage straight to the sheriff's office. They laughed, said they'd issue a warning. I said, "Don't bother." I had a better idea. The next morning, I started work early, right at dawn, hammering louder than usual, not out of spite, Just efficiency Karen came out 30 minutes later, wearing a robe and fury, hair sticking up like she'd been electrocuted. "You need to stop right now." I kept hammering. I said stop. I turned, wiped my hands on my jeans. "Karen, this fence is on my land. If you've already been warned, I've got video, I've got documents. You don't want to go down this road?" She jabbed her finger toward the sky like it held the answer. "You think you can just shut out the community? You think you can put up walls and act like you're above us?" I didn't respond. "You wait. I'm calling the sheriff." "You're not above the law." I almost smiled. She stormed inside, slamming the door so hard her fake wreath fell off. He picked up my phone, dialed a number I knew by heart. "This is Patterson. I think you're about to get a call. Just letting you know. It's about me." I waited. Sure enough, the dispatcher's voice crackled through. "She's on the line now. Says there's an unauthorized fence and an aggressive man on her property. Tell her help's on the way." I clicked off, looked at the nearly finished fence. Only one section left, one perfect panel that would cut off her self-declared shortcut across my land. He measured twice. Cut one, secured it with fresh nails. As I stepped back, I heard it again, the scream, "You're going to jail." The little dog barked in unison. Didn't flinch, walked to my truck, grabbed my badge, slipped it onto my belt and waited. Because when the sheriff arrives, he usually comes in uniform, and today the cruiser pulled up 10 minutes later. Sunlight bounced off the hood like a spotlight, and Karen strutted onto her lawn like she was stepping onto a red carpet, her phone in one hand, her dog leash in the other. Her expression had victory written all over it. "He's over there. That's him. The man threatening me. The one building that fence illegally." The deputy stepped out. Young guy, fresh out of academy. "Jake, good kid. Bit nervous?" He took one look at me. His face twitched like he was trying to figure out if this was a prank. I walked up slow, calm, my badge clipped to my belt. "Afternoon, Jake." "Ah, Sheriff Patterson. I mean, Mr. Patterson?" "Ah." He glanced at Karen, then back at me. You could see the sweat forming. "She called it in. Said someone was trespassing and building on public property." I nodded, pulled out the deed again, handed it to him. Same laminated page, same boundary lines. Nothing changed. He read it, then double-checked it against the map on his phone. Karen stood behind him, arms folded, foot tapping. "Well, what's taking so long?" "Arrest him." Jake looked up, blinked. "Ma'am, according to this record, this is his property." Karen blinked to no. "That's not possible. We had a vote. The HOA determined this is a green corridor." Jake scratched his head. "I'm sorry, but that doesn't override the legal deed. You'd need a court ruling. And even then, not likely." Her face turned red, then purple. "A shade not even nature could replicate. You're all in on this. You're protecting him. He probably bribed someone." I held back a smirk. Jake stepped back. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to stay off his property. This is a civil matter, not criminal. And you have no legal access." Karen's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Then I want to file a harassment complaint. He's harassing me." "With that fence?" Jake blinked again. "A fence doesn't qualify as harassment. I feel unsafe." Jake looked at me, then at the 10-foot fence behind me, then at the dog that had started licking its own foot. "Ma'am, with all due respect, I think you should let this go." "Wrong words." Karen's voice exploded. "I will not. I am the acting president of this HOA. I have rights. I have a duty to protect the aesthetic value of our neighborhood." Jake gave me a glance, the kind that said, "Good luck," then turned back to his cruiser and left before she could latch onto his arm. Karen stormed inside, but not before pointing at me with a trembling hand. "This isn't over. You'll regret this." The next day, I got a letter, certified, from the HOA board. It demanded immediate removal of the fence, cited fictitious bylaws, referenced a non-existent community rulebook, I laughed. Made a copy, mailed it back with a note that said, "Try again." Then I checked the fence cam. Motion sensor picked up activity around midnight. Same figure, same pajamas. This time, she brought a rake. Tried to pull down the panel. Failed. Tripped on her own dog. Fell into a bush. Got back up and kicked the fence like it owed her money. Downloaded the footage, saved it to 3 backups. Uploaded it to a private folder labeled Karen's Greatest. Hits the next morning, she left a flyer on every mailbox, warning residents about an aggressive neighbor. She left out my name, but not my address. Said I was threatening community safety. Said my fence was a psychological hazard that afternoon. Neighbor stopped by. Carl, retired electrician. Good guy, she's spinning stories, Luke. Said you threatened her with a weapon? I stared. Only thing I've threatened her with is lumber, he chuckled. Just watch your back. She's desperate. You know how she gets when she's losing control. That night I saw either next move, she parked her SUV across my driveway. On my land, slammed the doors like a warning shot. Stuck a piece of paper under my windshield wiper. Another fake fine. $1,000. For violating visual serenity standards. Called the real sheriff this time. Old friend. He came down himself. She's pushing you. Wants you to snap? I nodded. Not going to happen. He glanced at the footage I showed him. Her voice shouting into my camera. Threats. Vandalism. More threats. Want us to press charges. Not yet. I had a plan. But it needed her to dig deeper, and she did. 2 days later, a meeting was announced. Emergency HOA session. Open to all residents. Topic: fence controversy. I went. Sat in the back, quiet. Watched her walk to the front like she owned the place. Stack of papers in one hand, pointer stick in the other. She clicked on a projector, displayed grainy photos of my fence. This structure violates our shared vision. It is hostile, militaristic, anti-neighborly. People murmured. She clicked again. Motion to vote on forced removal. Under Section 12 of our covenant agreement, someone raised a hand. What covenant agreement? She ignored them. Another voice, didn't he? Buy that land legally? Karen pressed her lips tight. He manipulated an old man into selling. It's a moral betrayal. I stood slowly. I have the deed. The recording of the sale. It was notarized, transparent. Public record. She spun toward me. You're disrupting. You're not a board member. You're not even part of the HOA. Exactly. Silence. Spread like a fog. That's why your rules don't apply to me. That land, that house. Not under your jurisdiction. A neighbor in the front row leaned forward. You mean? She's been finding someone who's not even in the HOA. Heads turned. Karen's face twisted. Well, that's a technicality. He's still part of the neighborhood. He still affects us. Someone else stood. You made me pay a $400 fine. For having a wind chime, another voice joined. You said our grass had to be spiritually harmonious. The crowd shifted, turned, grumbled. Karen slammed the projector off. Grabbed her papers, stormed out. I let the silence speak. When I stepped outside, saw her car peeling around the corner, I knew then she wasn't done, but neither was I. Why? Fence stood. My land held on. The storm was only getting started. The wind picked up the next morning, carrying the scent of wet grass and blooming jasmine and something else, to plastic and sour like desperation. I stepped outside, coffee in hand, and paused. There it was, spray paint red letters across my fence. Trespasser, criminal scum. I stared at it for a long time. The paint still dripped like blood from a fresh wound. The letters crooked and angry, the handwriting unmistakable. Finally crossed the line. Checked the footage again. Same figure, hoodie. A paint can in hand, her little dog tied to a tree while she vandalized my fence like it had insulted her ancestors. I saved the video and made 3 more backups. Then I called a buddy who worked with the county media liaison and asked him a question. How fast could a clip go viral if sent to the right people? He said give me an hurry, waited, made a sandwich, drank my coffee, called Carl and told him to be ready by lunchtime. The video had over 40,000 views. By 1:30 my phone started ringing with numbers I didn't recognize. By 2 o'clock a local news van pulled up just outside the HOA sign. Karen came out wearing a sun hat and sunglasses like a celebrity hiding from the paparazzi. But it was too late. The news anchor called her ma'am, asked for a statement on the video of her defacing private property and the audio of her calling me a backwoods thug with a badge. She sputtered, said the footage was manipulated, said the dog in the video wasn't even hers, even though the mutt barked right on cue from her porch. The HOA board called an emergency meeting again. This time they didn't invite her, they called me instead. We met at Carl's house, where the board sat on plastic chairs in his garage, sipping lemonade, looking more exhausted than powerful. One of them leaned forward, a woman named Beth, her eyes sharp behind thin glasses. We had no idea she was doing this. Another voice chimed in. She told us you threatened her, that you were building a fence to trap wildlife. Carl chuckled. He built a fence to trap crazy, and its working. Laughter broke out, thin and tired, but really. Set down the printed deed, the footage, screenshots, and the citation letters she duct-taped to my door. Don't want drama. I don't want revenge. I want her to stop. Beth nodded. Then we're removing her from the board and we'll issue a letter to all residents clarifying you are not under HOA jurisdiction. You never were. I nodded again. Was a good start, but not enough, because Karen didn't care about rules or titles or humiliation. She only cared about control, and she'd just lost every bit of it that night. She pounded on my door, her face flushed with fury, tears in her eyes, but not the kind that came from pain, the kind that came from pride, being kicked out in front of everyone. You ruined everything. I said nothing. You manipulated them, turned them against me. Still nothing. I was trying to protect this neighborhood. I looked at her face, watched the cracks forming. You were trying to control it. She took a step back. You'll regret this. I'll sue. I'll get the county involved. I opened my door wider. You already did. I am the county. She stared, then turned and walked away, slower this time. Not like a storm, but like someone heading toward their own shadow. 2 days passed, then 3. I didn't see her. No dog, no car, her windows shut, blinds closed, like the house had gone blind. Then Sunday morning, the sirens came. Stepped outside in jeans and a shirt still damp from dishwater and ambulance. One cruiser, no lights flashing, just slow rolling dread. I walked toward the house, saw them carrying her out on a stretcher, not unconscious, but pale and shaking. One of the medics spoke low, stress-induced collapse, likely a panic attack, maybe something more. I didn't smile. I didn't feel anything. I just watched. Later that evening, Carl came by with a six-pack and a frown. She's in the hospital. They're keeping her overnight. I nodded once he sat down beside me on the porch. You think this'll stop now? No. He cracked open a beer. What's next? I finished the fence, and I did with new planks, unstained, fresh, and clean, hiding the red letters that still ghosted beneath the grain. I didn't paint over them. I let them stay reminder. But 3 nights later, I heard the clicking again. Not a saw, this time keys. Someone trying the gate. I looked through the cam, saw a figure smaller than before, crouched, trying to slide something through the lock. A teenager. Maybe older. Couldn't tell with the hoodie. Then I saw her step into Frem Karuno of the hospital and into mischief. She whispered something to the kid, pointed at the lock, then toward my yard. I stepped out into the yard, didn't say a word, just held up my phone and pointed it at them. She froze. The boy ran. She didn't stood tall, or tried to, but her shoulders were shaking. You can't keep me out. You can't try me. She turned, walked away again, her steps slower than before. No words, no threats. Just silence, but the damage was done. Now it was trespassing with a minor conspiracy, attempted break-in. Sent the footage to the sheriff, same as before. Fee? Asked one question, pressed charges. I waited. Then said not yet, not until she made her last move, because I knew she always did. It happened on a Wednesday, the air thick with humidity, and the sun barely piercing the clouds like it was watching but not judging. I had just come back from town groceries in the backseat fence, standing tall and strong when I saw her again, not sneaking, not hiding, standing in front of my gate like a queen who lost her kingdom but still expected tribute. She was holding a document tie. Stepped out slow, left the groceries in the car. You're trespassing. No, I'm not. This is official. You've been served. She held out the paper hand. Shaky Nye took it, read it, and almost laughed. She had filed a civil injunction, claiming emotional distress, property devaluation, psychological trauma, even accused me of using my position as sheriff to intimidate. Harry looked up. Karen, you're really doing this? You've humiliated me. Made me a joke. I have every right. I stepped forward. No, you had every opportunity. And you chose war. She blinked, but stood her ground. This community will never accept you. I smiled, just slightly funny. They already do. Right on cue. Carl walked over from his driveway, followed by Beth and two other board members. They stood behind me like silent witnesses, like the kind that show up in courtroom dramas and say everything without a word. Karen's hand dropped to her side. The paper fluttered. To the dirt. You can't win. I turned toward Carl. Still got the footage? He nodded. All of it. Posted. Karen's eyes widened. No. No, you wouldn't. It's public record. You filed a false claim against a county official. You vandalized private property. You trespassed multiple times. With a minor, she started to shake her head, but the weight of everything was already crashing down. And if you keep pushing, I'll press charges for every single act. Felony mischief, criminal harassment, even conspiracy. If I can prove you coached that kid. Her voice came out hollow. They'll laugh at me. They already are, and they worth it. Evening. The footage hit 3 local news sites, then national blogs, then TikTok. Within hours, the clip was viral. Her face blurred at first, then not. Someone even auto-tuned her shouting into a remix song. My favorite line was still, "You can't trap me with your timber tyranny." It made it to the morning news as a joke segment. Called the HOA. Horicran was nowhere to be seen. The next week, I got a letter from the HOA, formally apologizing and announcing her permanent removal from all committees and any future elections. They even offered to fund a community event to rebuild. Trustee said no, trust isn't built with party sit. It's built with silence earned over time. 2 weeks later, a for sale sign went up in Karen's yard. She didn't throw a goodbye party, no. One helped her pack. She left the way she lived, loud in her head, but quiet in reality. And her last morning, I watched from the porch as the movers loaded her last box, her little dog sitting beside her leash, limp like surrender. She looked up one last time. Our eyes met. There were no words, only the sound of the fence creaking in the breeze like it was sighing in relief. She drove off. No honk, no wave, just silence and sigh. Finished my coffee, stepped down the porch, walked the perimeter of my land. Every board, every nail, every inch was mine. No threats, no drama, just space that belonged to me. Again, Trime planted flowers along the edge. Not for beauty, not for revenge, just for me. And when a neighbor passed by and nodded, I nodded back. No words needed. Later, Carl and Beth stopped by again, brought lemonade and folding chairs. You won? I shook my head. No. She lost. I just stayed standing. Beth smiled. And that fence, best investment I ever made. As the sun dipped below the rooftops and the shadows stretched long across the grass, I looked out at the land I had fought for and thought about what it meant to hold your ground without losing your soul. Then Carl laughed and held up his phone. Guess what? Someone made a sticker of her quote, "Timber tyranny," selling like crazy. I laughed. Too good. Let her go viral one more time. We clinked our cups and the fence stood tall, like a boundary, like a lesson, like a line no one crossed again.